Good afternoon. It's a privilege to be speaking to all of you about business model changes in learning and teaching. In particular, I focus on understanding how business models are moving from linear business models to network business models and to platforms. And this transition, this transformation is affecting businesses across industries, and education clearly does not remain untouched. So, what I will be focusing on for the next 8 to 10 minutes is laying out two key models in which the way education is created and the way education is delivered, the way value is created and consumed in education is being transformed because of the way business models are moving from linear business models to platform business models. So, when I talk about linear business models, I refer to them as pipes. Traditionally, we've always seen education work like pipes, and this is not something that's restricted to education. If you think of how most businesses have worked, how television channels work, they source content from the production side and they deliver it to the consumption side. If you think of how manufacturing works, how Toyota works, it works like a pipe. All supply chains work like a pipe. All service delivery models traditionally work in a linear fashion like a pipe. And in that same vein, education has always worked like a pipe. There's been a teacher who's been responsible for creating and delivering the course material, and there's been a student at the other and consuming it. And it's always been this linear, unidirectional flow of value that we've seen in education. What we're seeing increasingly is the rise of education as a platform, and this is when we talk about platforms, we usually think of, say, Android, where the platform essentially creates an infrastructure on top of which others, namely developers, can create value in the form of apps. Well, education works in a similar manner because the apps in education are essentially the courses. Teachers can create courses, and as long as you provide a platform that connects the teachers with the students, all that you need to do as a business is create that infrastructure on which these courses can be created, hosted, and delivered, and create the conditions that determine what a good interaction between the teacher and the student constitutes. And so increasingly, we are seeing models move towards this platform model. The first thing that happens with when we think of a network platform is the fact that there's an explosion in consumption. It's no longer just the number of people you can fit in a room. It's no longer just the number of people that can be concentrated at a particular location. Your market can potentially be global, and this is something that we are very well aware of. It's the shift from traditional retail models to the Amazon model to the online retail model, where typically your market is essentially global. And so what we are the first model that we're seeing with education is essentially rethinking who can be a student. And at its very core, if I were to really dumb this down, what this model does is treat education like online media. Now there might be many different perspectives on that education is different from media. The course of media, the role of media is just to deliver content from the producer to the consumer. The role of education is actually to enable learning, not just to harness attention. But at its most basic, what we see in the rise of MOOCs today is that anyone can be a student. Essentially, the way media works, instead of you having to be a subscriber of a particular newspaper, or you having to be at the end of a specific channel, you can access any media from anywhere. That's essentially what's happening with education today, where anyone can be a student. You do not any longer need to be enrolled within the physical confines of a particular institution. And with the rise of models like Coursera, this is exactly what we're seeing. We're rethinking who can be a student, and there's nothing totally new about this model, in the sense that what this model does is it solves global content delivery, whereas in the past content delivery was restricted, and the model in which it was delivered was different. This solves the problem of content delivery to a larger audience, and it unbundles learning from the university. It's You don't necessarily have to be within the confines of a university, or within the you don't have to go through the learning experience, the learning engine of a university. You can get that same learning elsewhere. But this is where the question of learning becomes more complex, because how do you differentiate? Education at the end of the day is not just about watching videos and uh, reading articles. It's there's a learning component involved which needs to be tested, and there's this whole question that comes in with when we rethink who the student is, and when we unbundle learning from the university, how does that impact testing? And this is where an an important point comes into the picture, where how do you solve governance in the case of remote testing? How do you ensure that users do not game the testing modules that you have? How do you ensure that users do not quote unquote cheat to get a certain degree out of it? Which brings us to the next point that's extremely important when we talk about education. The end product in education is not just learning, it's also accreditation. And this is where the certification and accreditation part become extremely important. When are we going to reach a phase where the accreditation gained from learning from a MOOC is going to actually be equal to the accreditation, or is going to be relevant enough and comparable to the accreditation gained from actually attending a university like the Harvard Business School? And so that's the this is one of the key issues that come up with MOOCs. How do you solve these two basic problems? The testing to ensure that learning has happened, and the certification and accreditation problem, because at the end of the day education is more than just watching videos. And this is where I would like to introduce the second model, which has become more popular in recent times, which essentially involves the explosion in production. So we saw the explosion in consumption with anyone becoming a student, but what's happening now is anyone can become a teacher. We're rethinking who can be a teacher in this world. And this is where I'd like to introduce um, a startup that I've been personally closely involved with as an advisor, a startup called Skillshare, which is essentially an education marketplace. Anyone can be a teacher. You can just go there, set up a class, and start teaching. And this is an important case study in terms of how anyone can be a teacher model evolves. The way Skillshare evolved has been an interesting story, and there have been many different versions to the marketplace end to end. When it first launched, Skillshare was little more than an Eventbrite. It was a glorified um, ticketing system. It was a place where you could host or you could sell uh, a class that would otherwise happen offline, and so the course would be delivered offline, but the purchasing the subscription for the course, signing up for the course, would happen online. And this was the first version of Skillshare, but it realized that this was not a version that scaled very well, because you were redefining who the teacher could be, but you were still not solving a global content delivery problem. And so in version 2, Skillshare moved to a model where it started creating persistent online courses. You, as the teacher, could create a course, host it, and it would be there forever, and people could keep coming and signing up for the course, and there would be a passive source of income being generated for you as a teacher. And that was a key shift. But what what Skillshare figured at this point was that it's great for anyone to be a teacher, and it creates a whole new set of potential courses that can be offered. But what's important in learning is not just the teacher to student interaction, it's also the peer learning, the social interaction between students. And so Skillshare then, in its next version, started enabling peer learning models, where teachers could lay out projects and define projects on which students could create and exchange their projects between each other and vote it, rank it, and give each other feedback. And specifically for design courses where these projects could have very clear visual outcomes, these became extremely engaging for the students, and also created an additional way of learning within that classroom. And finally, Skillshare over time realized that the marketplace model is great. You set up a course, um, a student signs up for it, the teacher gets money, the platform makes a cut. But what's more important in what's more sustainable as a revenue model is the traditional school model, which is essentially that you work on a subscription basis. You subscribe to courses, you subscribe to a school, and you get all the courses that are bundled within the school. And so over time, Skillshare has moved from a transaction to a subscription model, and this movement has been extremely interesting because the moment you move from transaction to subscription, you need to start guaranteeing quality. You cannot get users to subscribe to something unless you clearly guarantee quality in what you're offering. And this is where it's important to understand that platforms do not actually own quality, because anybody, when anybody can be a teacher, you can end up having a lot of crap also coming onto the platform. And that is where Skillshare put in a curation system, curated a few courses, and offered those on subscription, continued to offer the rest on transaction. And so that's been an interesting move where the anyone can be a teacher model has moved gradually towards a school model where certain teachers for certain courses become good enough to be um, hosted on a subscription basis. And so overall, in summary, what I wanted to share was that there, with the movement to education as a platform, as you see more and more models evolve, you're typically going to see one of these two things happening: either the teacher or the student. The question of who can be a teacher, who can be a student, what kind of interaction we're enabling between the two can keep changing. And the role of the new generation in edtech business then becomes to be a platform on which these courses can be created, and the subsequent ensuing interactions between the two sides can be enabled. Thank you.